Hi, Nikki. It's wonderful to have you join us on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
I know you've made a remarkable transformation in your parenting journey from feeling overwhelmed and constantly yelling to now feeling confident about your family's dynamics and your children's future. Could you share more about your journey, especially the before and after?
Absolutely. So it's always a work in progress, right? I'm always learning and growing, but it went from just constant chaos and stress. And the hardest part about it was that I actually worked with children. Since I graduated high school, I just immediately was so drawn to children. And I had a lot of success in studied child psychology, child growth and development, had a lot of success working with kids and helping parents with their children, especially if they had any kind of difficult behaviors. But then when I had my own children, it was so hard. So I knew what they needed, right? But then I couldn't provide it. And the shame and the guilt was so intense because it's like, know, I should be good at this, So I had to kind of go off and do some more research and figure out why couldn't I provide what my child needed if I knew what they needed. And I learned a lot about family dynamics being so different. And I struggle with anxiety and depression. And I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 38. So undiagnosed for a long time. What I learned, the dynamics is your children are a direct reflection of your internal states. So other people's kids, not so much. So that was a lot easier for me. But for my
Yeah.
own, it was very triggering. And they basically show you and they reflect back onto you what you need to heal and to grow. And so that's why family can be so triggering sometimes. So
Mm.
once I realized that, I had it like this big epiphany. And sometimes when you have an epiphany, it makes it easier for you to create new habits. Like you don't have to just do it every single day to make a new path. If you have an epiphany, it's like the path is just fired through and you're just different, right? So that epiphany was, oh my gosh, this is coming from me. It's not even from my child, it's for me. And then the next day I started being aware of my feelings, my emotions, and I watched my child's emotions completely transform. And that was life changing for me. I'm still learning and growing. I still struggle with the ADHD and anxiety and depression, but I've had to figure out ways that I am able to make things better and grow and learn and help teach my child things along with me because I don't have it mastered. I have to grow with my child, right? So I have to figure out a way to help myself be able to do it without going down that spiral of anxiety. And then I started sharing that with other people, and they said, This really helps. This really works. So you should share it more."
I agree. I agree. It so often feels like a personal development course, right? And my kids
Yes.
teach me so much about me and my strengths and weaknesses, my unhealed wounds. And even feel they're my accountability partners. Like they're not afraid to call you on it
Yeah.
when my behavior is not aligned with our family values and what I teach them. They're first to tell me, Mommy, that's not how we do it.
I love that.
I love
I
that.
love that. I think it's beautiful that you let your kids, you're on that level with them because we're still the parents, right? We still have those boundaries as a parent, but it's okay to come down with them and say, I'm working on this too, right? We're going to help each other. And I do the same thing. Like with my 8-year-old, I'm like, okay, mommy has a hard time with this too. He's just like me. He's my mini me. So that's why we have to do everything. We have to learn everything together. So I'm like, we have struggles with our emotions. And sometimes we say and do things we don't mean to. So if you see mommy acting like this, just come hold my hand. And that'll tell me you do that thing again. I need your help with that, buddy. So I love that you do that with your kids too. You hold each
I
other
love the
accountable.
hand holding. It's gentler than saying something that might
Yeah,
trigger me even more.
exactly. Because we're in that state in our minds where if anybody says anything, we're just like, and we lash out, right? So I've learned for myself at least, if he comes and holds my hand, that's what like snaps me out of it. But if he
Mm.
comes and tells me you're doing that thing, then I might snap. so so I want to be snapped out of it. I don't want to snap at my kids.
I love that. I love that. I'll steal that.
Yes, please do.
You talk about the importance of syncing up with your kiddo heart to heart. And this requires a shift in perspective, doesn't it? Like how we
Yes.
see our kids' needs, how we see their changing mood and their so-called misbehavior, even our own expectations from them. So where do we start the process?
I think the best way to help us is when we learn about like the deeper root sources of these behaviors, instead of looking at them as, oh, my child is doing this to get that, or they're consciously doing this on purpose to bother me. We see these behaviors like that automatically as parents. Usually, if we don't know any better, that's where we go. And then we get triggered, then we react. But if we look at it like, oh, their behaviors are signals and they're telling us what's really going on under the surface, it kind of shifts our perspective, and we look at it more like a detective or like a scientist, like, okay, what's going on with my kid and how can I help them? Because they don't know what's going on either. It's just automatic. It's just like a defense mechanism. So I think being educated in what the core needs are psychologically for all human beings, and then if we don't get those core needs met, or if we don't think they're being met, how do they surface? What behaviors come up? Because that'll guide us to how do we handle the root source instead of battling with these behaviors, because that doesn't work, because that's not the real problem. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Let's tell people what are the core needs so we get more clear about it.
Yeah. So every human being has three core needs to develop socially, emotionally, and really thrive. And that is a sense of connection, a sense of autonomy, and a sense of safety. And it's not about whether or not the parents are providing it or not, because a lot of times my clients will say, well, I make sure my child is safe. I don't know what you mean. And I'm like, of course you do. But you know how every person is different and we all speak almost like this unique, like a love language. So you could be providing safety for your child, but subconsciously, they could be not feeling that they're safe for certain reasons. So don't take it personal. We just have to figure out, kind of like a puzzle, how can we do things so that our child feels like they're safe and feels like they have a sense of autonomy and feels a connection with us. Because if they don't feel these, then certain behaviors pop up and say, hey, I don't know what's wrong with me, but I need something here, help. It's like when you need something, you'll get it whether it's good or bad.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, for example, like the sense of connection, and adults, we do the same thing. It's kind of like if we didn't have connection with our parents or with somebody very close to us when we were younger, maybe we started acting out with difficult behaviors to get that attention. And it didn't matter if it was good or bad attention. It's just something that our psyche needs. So maybe we made that difficult behavior a pattern, and now we still do it as adults. And that's one realization I had. I was like, oh my gosh, that's why I acted like that, through my 20s. I still do that once in a while. So even these things can be looked at as parents, like, why have I acted this way throughout my life as well?
Yeah. And once we
Hmm.
recognize that's the problem, that's the unmet need, what do we do to prevent that? We give them
So
a better vehicle for that?
yeah, so let's take an example. So we were talking about sense of connection. So the behaviors that seem to emerge when a child doesn't feel a sense of connection is a lot of clinginess, whining all the time. I know for me, because my kiddos battle with this because I am so busy a lot because I work from home. And so if I'm on the phone and if I do anything where my attention is turned away, they just start interrupting over and over. That means I need to address their sense of connection so that they feel like they're connected with me and they don't have to do that reflexively if I'm focused somewhere else. So then I know, okay, the best way to handle that is just 10 minutes of connection with intention time a day. So it's just 10 minutes where you're focused solely on them and you do something that they think of and you put your phone away. Nothing can pull your mind away from them. Like you release all the worries, you release everything, and you just think, I'm going to give my all to my kiddo for these 10 minutes straight. And if you do that every day, they feel it. They feel so connected to you. And then the other behavior drops off. So instead of like yelling, from now on, you can't do this, right? And it's exhausting and it doesn't work. We can see, oh, I need to address this behavior. Let's try this technique. And you can experiment with different techniques, right? Because every child's different. So if that one doesn't work, we can try a different one that helps them feel that sense of connection. So,
I love that. I love prevention. So
mm-hmm.
easier to prevent than to solve the problem once it's
Yes,
arrived.
yes. And that's what really creates like that lasting change instead of the band-aids, right? So we could force our kids to act a certain way, but that's not really going to do much for them. and we want what's best for them. So instead of kind of forcing a change in their behavior, we can look at the root source and address that.
Would you like to explore another example for one of the other core needs?
Okay, so another really common one for the sense of safety. If there's no structure in the day with the little ones and it's just kind of up in the air all the time, I've noticed they don't subconsciously feel safe. Or if you have like no boundaries, because we went through these stages generationally where a lot of us were kind of traumatized by the parenting styles of our parents when we were younger, and because they had a very strict, so a lot of us were kind of damaged from that. And then we went all the way to the other side where it's like, whatever our child wants, we provide. And then they have no boundaries. And it's also bad for them. So we want something right in the middle where we have those strong boundaries, but open communication, because the strong boundaries and a good schedule make them subconsciously feel safe. They know they're safe with you. They know what to expect because of those boundaries that you set with them. They know what they can and can't do and what might happen if they do something they're not supposed to do. So one of the ways that this can emerge in children if they don't feel a sense of safety is moving from one activity to the next. They just have a tantrum, like a complete meltdown, or going from one environment to the next. They have a meltdown. When they start school age, as soon as they get home, they're having a meltdown. And as soon as you drop off, they're having a meltdown. They don't feel safe. So you can address the sense of safety by creating a very like strategic schedule that they'll get used to. And gradually that helps them become more confident so that whatever environment they're in, they still feel safe because they have that security and safety deep within their subconscious at home.
I love that. And they know what to expect.
Exactly.
Awesome. Yep. Boundaries is such an essential topic for parents, and I think we need lots of help with that. Can you share some key points on how to establish clear, loving boundaries that kids will understand and respect?
Yeah, and it can be tough because it depends on the age range, right? So I work with moms who usually have younger kids, like 8 and younger, or usually 9 and younger. But as they get a little bit older, you should always sit down with them and have it be like a project you do together. That even the younger ones, like as soon as they can start talking, you can make it something where you're going back and forth. Even though you're more in control of the conversation, you can give them that part where they feel like they're a part of the conversation and figuring out what are the house rules, what are the family values, and talk about it. And then even when they're really young, they still, if it's repeated, at least once a week, you can go over the house rules, the family values, and it becomes a pattern, almost like a ritual for them. So that makes them more open to following them and understanding those boundaries and listening to you because it's something that they were a part of and they want to be included in. So also when they get older, you want them to help figure out what should the consequences be if we don't these, because then they're more likely to do it because they were a part of it, right? For the little ones, I've noticed that using like jingles, little phrases and jingles that you can repeat, because you want it when they don't really speak yet, you want to use like short phrases and you just repeat. And in your mind, I'm going to have to repeat this over and over again. Don't think they'll get it the first time. Just know and remind yourself, this is going to have to be repeated. So that way you don't get triggered and upset. So for example, if your toddler is like throwing things around the house, that can be really triggering. But if you say, make a sound, here's a ball, let's go outside. And we just have to do that over and over again. Give them something. Or if you have little soft pom-poms, here's something you can throw. Here's something you can throw. And you just want to figure out some kind of short, either a word or a phrase, and just keep repeating it. Or another one where the toddlers stand on the couch or stand on tables. And you're like, what do I do? You have to repeat over and over, feet on the floor, feet on the floor. And those are like the boundaries when they're really little.
I'm more interested in like 5 and older. Do you think we should have it written somewhere, like a list of house rules or something, or that would be too overwhelming?
I don't think so. And actually, what I do is I created a little document. I've created so many things, I swear, because we're so like unique and I constantly have to be shifting things to make it work for our family. But I created a document for boundaries. And so what we do when we go over it, usually at dinner time, because we're all sitting together, as we go over what are the current boundaries, because as they age, you kind of shift your focus. They master things, and then there becomes these new things that you have to deal with and new rules you have to put in place because now they're at a different point. So I take this every week, and then we see what they've mastered. We talk about the boundaries. Like, for example, I have an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old. So we have a lot of sibling rivalry issues going on. And we have a lot of device issues. So that's currently what's on our boundary list. So we'll talk about what the boundary is, why it's there. So why is it a good boundary to have? Like for the example, the devices, they can be really hard on your brain. So we have to give our brain a break. That's why we have this boundary. So it's good for your body to take breaks. And then we talk about together, what are the consequences if we don't follow this boundary? And so the one that they came up with me was that, they'll have a day completely detoxing if they are not able to follow the boundary. That tells us they need to detox from it for at least a whole day. And then we'll say underneath that if there's anything we need to update or change. So if it's there for a while on our list that we go over and we need to update it or we need to change it to a new one, we also do that. And then I have like a little calendar on there to where I can check like, okay, we did good this day. We did good this day with these boundaries. So I think it's good to have
it.
it.
Is there a difference for the 8-year-old and the 6-year-old? Because you can argue that the older one should get more time on her device, but then is it fair? Like, how do you handle that situation?
So I do them the same because they're so close in ages. So it might be different if they're a little bit spread out. And I know their development's very different between the 6 and 8, but since the devices are so hard on their brains, I just tell them it's good that we only have an hour a day and we need to take a break after that. We need to have brain breaks. And since I do homeschool and some of it's online, we got into this gray area. My 8-year-old is the one that I homeschool. And he's like, well, if I'm on a device for school, that's not fair if it counts. And I'm like, okay, you're right. We'll not count that in your free play on a device. Okay. So there are some gray areas. And then I just explained to my little one, well, he's doing school right now. So this doesn't count. He doesn't get the free time that you get right now. And they do pretty well in understanding it. So when we talk about it all together, that's when they do really well of understanding it because we're all on this level of working together at that point, rather than like kind of talking down and telling them what's going to happen.
That's a key point. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Done with their assistance and their ideas. I love the consequence they chose.
They get like really strict on themselves. Sometimes I'm like, whoa, that's a little harsh, guys. Maybe we should pull it back a little bit. But they get really into it when you let them, be a part of it, let them decide. They get excited. They're like, ooh, okay, I get to decide what happens here. And then they get a little crazy sometimes. I'm like, okay, we don't need to be grounded for 2 months.
Okay,
Yes.
moving to another aspect, I'm curious about the hand-in-hand parenting path. Can you tell us more about this approach?
Yes, I get so excited about this because of my issues with the ADHD and the anxiety and the depression. Like I get triggered very easily. I'm a very emotional person. I've always been very emotional. And my oldest, who's just like me, exactly the same. So you can imagine how it's like a whirlwind.
Mhm.
So if I get overwhelmed, I tend to shut down. And I was like, how can I learn all these skills that I clearly never learned in school for myself, like all these foundational life skills that I want to teach my children? How can I learn these and teach them at the same time without going down this spiral of being overwhelmed and too much anxiety and depression? So I had to figure out the 3 main areas for like real change was focusing on the child. So usually like the techniques for the core needs, focusing on the self. So helping me grow in those foundational skills, which pours out into your children, learning them as well. And then the environment, how to optimize your environment to work with your child and with you as you grow. And then I turned it into what I call the trifecta of focus framework, because there's those 3 areas, but I can't do it all without being overwhelmed. So I have a monthly cycle. And each month we focus on one developmental skill that we're going to work on together and grow hand in hand with. And 1 week I focus on the child technique. The next week I focus on the self technique. And the 3rd week is the environment. The 4th week of the month, I'm still practicing all 3 of those, combining them, reflecting on anything that I learned and just celebrating because we've worked on a new developmental skill together, right? And it wasn't overwhelming. It's just one thing each week, but it adds up. And
Mm.
each month we do a different developmental skill.
Some of these developmental skills.
Yeah. So I have a little list here so that I don't forget any. But I can give, I don't want to name off all of them because we'll be sitting here forever. But what I did was I took all these different skills that you can see a pattern within the people who are happy and successful in life, right? And I took them all and I put them in like 12 different categories. They kind of overlap in some places, but they're each very important. And then there's other skills that are inside of those, but the main 12. And then I was like, oh, that creates a whole year. It's perfect. It's 12 months. That creates a whole year, and I can just cycle that year and get better and better and build on that, right?
I love
So
that.
yes, I got so excited. I nerd out on this stuff because bettering myself and helping my kids is just one of the most important things in life. And I think that I want to spread that knowledge to help other moms who are struggling like me, that we can do this. Every mom struggles and we can do this. So the 12 that I wrote down are adaptability and flexibility. Those are in one, because if you're open to change and new experiences, then you're going to be more successful in life. You'll be able to handle it, right? So that's one that we focus on for a whole month together. Another example is goal setting and motivation is going to be really, really important when it comes to having any kind of success with anything my children want to do in life. I want them to learn how to find that internal motivation and be able to set goals and actually accomplish them instead of going into that like never-ending cycle of failing, which could become a habit. Also, to make sure that we learn communication skills is one of them, because I want us to learn how to always have open communication with each other and also communication with other people. And that's how we learn, how we grow, how we make connections in the world. We feel more complete as human beings. So that's a big one. It affects everything in our lives, right? And then problem solving. I feel like this isn't really taught too much in school. We solve math problems and stuff, but I want problem solving as more of a life skill to be ingrained in my life and my children's lives.
So how do
And
you intentionally teach that during that week to the child, problem solving? Just
so whenever I'm focusing on the child that week, it's usually a type of game that we play. So for communication, for example, we would focus on flashcards of different emotions, and we play a game where we practice. So this is for a little bit younger, but we play a game where we practice imitating an emotion and guessing back and forth. And then if you have a little bit older kids, you can have scenarios. If you see this, you describe like an event and you see somebody, what do you think that person might be feeling right now? And what do you think would be a good thing to say to them to help? And so we have like scenario games, things like that. Whenever I'm focused on the child, it's always something fun. It's always like an activity that'll help build that skill. And then when I'm focused on the self, I'm more so focused on how can I communicate effectively with my children more and let them know I'm open for communication. So I'll practice journaling. That's a good one for communication, is I'll actually practice journaling, because sometimes I don't use my voice when I need to, and I don't open that line of communication. That's just me personally. So I'll journal to make sure I get it out, and then I can communicate it more effectively. So I'll do that each day that week. And then for environment, I might hang up something that we keep track of. For other developmental skills, we might just organize the house in a more optimal way to help us with that developmental skill. So they're all a little bit different, but they're teeny tiny baby steps each week, because I get so overwhelmed easily. So it has to be tiny so that I can continue to make progress.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of work.
So if we do like one thing each week, it doesn't seem like a lot. But when it adds up, it is a lot of progress, right?
Yeah, compounding. I love that. Okay, so many parents feel overwhelmed by the demands of modern parenting. Any advice for them to help them navigate these challenges?
This one is a tough one, and it really played a big role in when I was really deep into that overwhelm and that depression about not being able to handle, especially my oldest kiddo. And part of it was influence from my family and my friends that I was interacting with the most, is like they were judging my child, and then they were judging me. And then I started like feeding into that, and I became this parent that didn't have grace for myself or for my child. So it's really easy for other people to affect how you parent by letting their judgments consume you. Or for me, what I had to do was just cut off. I had to cut off that friend and not be around them anymore because they were just negatively affecting me. And that's just how we are as humans. We get affected by the people we hang out with. So especially someone like me who's extremely empathetic, I just take on everything from people around me. And so I said, okay, I need more boundaries. I need boundaries in my social life. And that's why we want to teach those to our kids at a young age. So they never let people walk all over them. They never let people put them in an uncomfortable situation that they can't say no to, right? So for me, I think having those strong boundaries and even writing them down sometimes, because that like ingrains it into our subconscious so that we don't have to remind ourselves too much. It's like we carry it with us in a confident way. We know it and we don't let anyone even barely cross it, which makes it easier. Because if you let people cross them all the way, it's harder to pull back. But yeah, I think having those boundaries and remembering to have grace with yourself and grace for your children, because social media is like, it's completely confused people on what reality is. Like all these perfect pictures we have on social media. Even sometimes people tell me like, I saw what you do and I was so nervous. I thought maybe you would like judge me because I work with their kids. And I'm like, oh no, I am constantly learning. We're all on this journey together. Don't you worry. Like we are going to learn from each other and grow. I would never judge you for anything like that. So I think it's important just to remind each other that we're all learning and growing as parents. It's hard.
Important one, because everything looks so perfect from the outside, but everyone is struggling with something. We never know what's happening behind the scenes.
There's always struggles. Always.
Yeah. Nikki, I love asking guests about books that have influenced them. Is there a particular book that you would recommend to any parent that could impact their approach to parenting? It doesn't have to be strictly a parenting book, though. Anything.
Okay, because my mind immediately went to children's books. And the reason why is because one of the most effective techniques that I've taught some parents is book therapy, which means if you find a book, like whatever obstacle you're facing with your kiddo, you can find a book that has a story and coping skills for that struggle, right? And if you read the book together, instead of it being you trying to tell them what to do or trying to fix anything, you're on this journey together, reading a book together, and they really internalize that. So you don't have the opposition that usually occurs with just trying to tell them how to do things, right? So any kind of children's book, and there's so many online now. If you go to Amazon, especially with emotions, you'll type in emotion children's book, and there's so many good books now that can help your child with these different obstacles that they're dealing with. For the younger ones, it could be potty training. Even you can buy a potty training book and read it with them. For the older ones, it could be more of like anger, these things that they might be struggling with. And you can read about a book that talks about the anger emotion. The one that I think I see the most that has a lot of great stuff is A Spot of Emotion. There's a whole series and it has all the different emotions. And I think they use it in a lot of child psychology clinics. So those could be good ones for you to look up for emotions.
That's a great tip to teach them through the books, because it's not addressing their behavior, it's talking about someone else. And it's much easier.
And humans in general don't like being told what to do. We just don't like it, but we love stories. We get so emotionally invested in it and we put ourselves in the story sometimes. So that's why it works so well to internalize the coping skills.
Yeah. Could you tell us about your community, the Transformational Mamas Tribe, and the free cheat sheet you'll offer to our listeners?
Yes. So I am in the process of still building up the membership, but it's going to be a community where we all have grace with each other. Like I was talking about, we're all working on things. I've created so many different resources for my personal use because of the things that I struggled with and my family struggled with. So I created all these tools and resources that are inside there, and they can actually be shared with anyone. So if you have family, friends that you want to share those with, that'll be great. And then there's a course on understanding those core needs and different ways you can address them depending on what's emerging in their behavior. And then there's also a year-long kind of working together as a group. We're going to do a year's worth of those developmental skills. So we'll know what we're working on each month and each week, and we'll do it all together, and we can reflect and celebrate together.
That's
But
perfect. You don't have to
yes,
invent the exercises yourself.
you don't have to come up with the techniques or anything yourself. It's all there, and we'll do it together. I love it. I can't wait.
Perfect.
But one of the best things is that little free cheat sheet on my website. That's preschoolparentingpanic.com. And this could be even for older kids, because it's those core needs that we all have, even as adults, right? But it's the 5 most common difficult behaviors that I've worked with the most, and their underlying core needs, and how you can address them, different ways you can address them. So that's a really good cheat sheet to start with. And it also kind of, I'm also like your cheerleader in that cheat sheet. Like, don't worry, you got this. It's only because we haven't learned this stuff yet. That's all.
That's a great resource. Thank you. So anywhere else people can find you and connect with you?
I
Instagram?
am on Facebook. I'm on all the social media platforms, but I just don't have time to be on social media much. So like, I'm just a busy mama, right? But you can find me at Nikki B Parenting on most of the social media platforms. Yeah, awesome.
Okay. Thank you for being with us. It was such a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you so much for having me. I love the mission that you're on to help all us parents really connect with our kids and grow with our kids.
I think that's the most important part, not the skills that we're going to teach them, but the connection that's going to last for life.
Yeah. And we're like bettering our lives and theirs at the same time. So it's a win-win.
It is.